Vandersloot gives it up. Parker to tie. You bet. Here's the 0-1. This is going to be a tough play. The Cubs. Finds Rose. Rose trying to get open. Fires away. Bang! It's over. The Bulls win at the buzzer. DeRozan to win it! Go! DeMar DeRozan delivers! Anderson hits it in the air to right. Back at the wall, and the White Sox win it! Big one-way field stumbling. Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown! Who will receive it first? After it is hoisted by the captain. Will it be the 40-year-old defenseman who has longed for this moment? Yes, sir. Walking right, Chicago! Woo!
Everybody, this is Mike Hughes, and you're listening to Mike on the Mic, everything Chicago sports-related podcast. This is currently a MLB trade deadline live feed. We have everything going on right now, all the way from Josh Hader going to the San Diego Padres for Taylor Rogers and a couple solid draft picks. I mean, we're breaking down everything today, all the way from Juan Soto to Wilson Contreras to everything that's going on. The Chicago Cubs have made some moves in the last couple of days, and we are bringing in the stat man, my guy, Dustin, who does amazing work for Chicago Cubs HQ and a bunch of other amazing networks that he's a part of, alongside with the ASAP network, where you may also be watching this live right now. But with that being said, we are going to bring in the stat guy and just kind of bring him into the fold of the conversations that have been the last couple of days. We have Eberflus going to a new organization in the New York Yankees, which is going to be a differently type of feel for him. I feel like right now, you have a sub-2 ERA with some pretty nice statistics that go in with that. We're going to bring Stat Guy in right now, kind of break down why we got what we got, and really just breaking down everything going on. With that being said, Stat Guy, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on, my guy. I'm fucking with the Mohawk, bro. I'm rocking with it. It looks like a 2014 Chris Bryant. I'm really enjoying it. How's your day going?
Good, but I don't know who this Eberflus guy going to the Yankees is. I know Efros is going to the Yankees.
Man, listen, I don't care what his name is. He ain't on my team no more. So, with that being said, Efros, whatever your name may be, he's gone. A 28-year-old with a 2.60-something ERA. You're looking at it. What did we get in return, Dustin? We got a top 7 prospect, now currently ranked 8th in the Cubs' top 10, already just getting traded there. How do you feel about it? What is the status right now with Jed Hoyer, and why do you think they got so much for someone like Scott, who typically doesn't put up these kind of numbers?
In terms of what we got for Efros, I actually like what we got in return. You're getting a guy who has already reached AAA in the Yankee system. He was 11-6 last year with an ERA hovering right around a 3.2. He's 6-7 this year, but his ERA is right around a 3.5, so it's not like he's pitching terrible this year. And he's a guy that I think is going to be in the major league rotation come September, just because you have to consider Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson are starting to reach their innings limits from where they've been at their career line, so they're going to need to have help come September. So I do think he gets an opportunity to showcase what he can do in September. And who knows, maybe he is going to be a good back-of-the-end rotation starter for the Cubs, because being 8th in the Cubs system already, you got to have some merit to it, especially when the Cubs system is now a top 5 system in Major League Baseball. So to be ranked 8th hours after you got traded, that shows that there's some merit behind it.
100%. Now, I want to ask you this, though, and it's definitely a weird conversation to have, because you understand with the Yankees, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're going to be able to bring in free agents. They're going to be able to spend that money. But when you look at somebody who in their pipeline was a 7, and you understand the pitching rotation and the bullpen situation with the New York Yankees, why make this move for Scott right now? Is it just strictly to win a World Series or bust right now? Or what was the idea behind trading such a great asset? Like you said, who's pretty close to coming to the big leagues. I don't really see the point behind, a couple years of Scott, who knows if he, in the second half of this season, is going to continue to play that way, especially on a team that's actually willing to contend in a much better division.
I mean, Efros gives that bullpen a different look because he's a sidearm pitcher, and you don't get many of those, especially in the American League. He's also a guy that has incredible command. He's got 12 walks and 68 strikeouts in his major league career, so he's got incredible command. And the Yankees just need back of the bullpen help. Aroldis Chapman is not the Aroldis Chapman of old, and he's hurt. Clay Holmes, who's been pretty solid all season long, served up the game-winning home run yesterday to Salvador Perez. So, I mean, he's going to be probably down today and maybe down tomorrow. So they kind of need that back end of the bullpen help. And Efers is a guy that can give you multiple roles. He's got some saves. He's pitched in the 8th inning. He's pitched in the 7th inning. He's started. He's pitched in the 6th inning. You can get a lot for him, and he's going to come at a cheap cost because he is still under team control for 2 years beyond this year. So he's a guy that's not going to cost the Yankees a ton, and looking at his success so far, he's somebody that I think does fit well with them, and I think they can do very well with having him in their bullpen at whatever role they give him.
Now, you look at that from that perspective with the Chicago Cubs right now and what we got for return. What are you really expecting from this kid? And what do you think his timeline is to when we're going to see him? I've heard a couple people say because of the eligible 5 rule and everything else that goes with that, you're going to have to try to maybe have a conversation of this kid's going to come up sometime early September, late August. Do you see that happening right now, or do you think we're going to have this kid sit here in the pipeline?
I'm honestly surprised we got as high as a prospect as we did.
Yeah.
For a guy like Efers. I thought we'd maybe get somebody in that 20-25 range. So to get a guy as highly regarded as this guy, that was a steal for the Cubs. And I think he's in by September, and mainly because Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson are going to be reaching career high in innings by the end of August. So there's a question as to whether either one of them is going to be pitching in September at all, given that they want to monitor their innings. Well, that's 2 more arms out of your rotation, so you're going to need more rotation arms. So that's when you can kind of employ this guy, put him in there for September, give him 5 starts, see what he does, and then you can reevaluate the situation come the offseason to see if he fits in your full season plans for the beginning of next season.
100%. And you look at what Hayden brings to the team. And for people that don't know, we keep talking about him and calling him the number 8, number 7 prospect for either division. It's Hayden Wesneski. Is that how you pronounce that? Wesneski. I'm sorry. It's always the skis that I just mess up their names. And apparently Eberflus, because I'm stuck on Bears. Obviously, you can see Efros, I apologize. I got mad love for you, but I'm in full Bears mode right now. Training camp has been going on, so I do apologize for that. But with that being said, Dustin, when you look at Hayden and you look at what this rotation could potentially be now, I think obviously you and I talked about it very early on. The Braylon experiment is over for me, and especially
I think it's over as him being a starter. I think he's still going to be a kind of a back. I said this to you last time I was on the show. I see him as an Aroldis Chapman or a Josh Hader, where you put him in for 2 innings, you get the most you can get out of that heater, and then you sit him.
Right, and that's where I feel like a lot of teams are starting to realize that, and a big part of it is our little brothers on the South Side. You've seen what's happened with Crochet. You've seen what's happened with Kopech and how that's really transitioned. Even Dylan Cease was one of those guys. He threw high in velocity, had Tommy John surgery. Now you kind of understand. You bring more to your game, and he's a completely different pitcher than he was when he was in the Cubs system. And I think that's a big part of it right now is you need to understand with Braylon, we don't need you to be a starter. And that was the difference, I feel like, between even 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you looked at this Cubs rotation in the minors, and it was like, this is terrifying. I don't know what's going to happen. There was Brandon Little and all these guys before they got moved.
It was Marquez and nobody.
Yeah, and it was like, I don't really see a future in our bullpen or even in our starting rotation from the minors perspective. And now you're looking at it as we have kids coming up, and even Caleb Killian, who me and you talked about it. What he was when he came up this season is not at all who he is going to be. He came up way too early, and that was one of those very questionable moves to me when you look at guys like Pete Crow Armstrong and James Triantos and even Brennan Davis still in the minors, but you brought up Caleb. It was very frustrating to me to see that. But with that being said, you're looking at Hayden and you're looking at Caleb and Justin and Keegan, and you're looking at all that, Jordan Wick, and you look at Cade Horton. It's really exciting right now to see these guys continue to flourish. And those are just a couple names. But when you really see this right now, there's another move that was made with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And to me, I hate it because we are making moves with both of the enemies, and it really frustrates me. But we got a good infielder. We got Zach McKinstry, and I really like that for Chris Martin. I feel like as much as I love Chris, I don't have an attachment to Chris whatsoever.
Not
And
a 37-year-old on a 1-year deal. You don't.
yeah, like it's like, hey, all respect to him. I loved watching him growing up, but it's one of those conversations where I'm looking at Zach and I like the overall energy that he brings to this team. Maybe he's not going to be your everyday starter. He's just going to be a role guy, a platoon guy, and that's fine. But I think he's a good energy guy to have in the clubhouse. He's been alongside with Mookie Betts and Bellinger and Justin Turner and all these guys for quite some time. So, he has championship pedigree. He's been with some guys who know how to do it, and I think that's good for this team right now. But for you, evaluating that trade, is that more so what you saw happening with the Yankees today? Like, because that's for me where I thought we were going to get with Scott, a kind of Zach McKinstry kind of guy.
I thought Efros could bring maybe something a little bit better than Martin, just because Efros has better numbers and he's younger and he's kind of got that deception that not a lot of pitchers have. But I expected the Cubs to kind of get somebody back like McKinstry, where McKinstry's a utility infielder who hasn't been given much of a major league opportunity, and when he was given that opportunity, he showed moments of promise, but for the most part, he still struggled because he only hit a 210. But in the minors, he's like a 283 hitter, so we know what he can do. Like when he's given like regular reps on the field, I figured the Cubs would kind of get somebody in that mold in the Yankee system, maybe like a 20 to 25 guy that might be in AAA, but he's been in AAA like the last couple of years, where he's kind of bounced between majors and AAA, just kind of looking for that organization to latch onto that gives him the opportunity. But I think McKinstry finds a way to make this team next year right out of camp. I think he's going to be a poor man's version of Ben Zobrist, where you can give him 5-6 different positions to play, and I think the Cubs will give him an opportunity to play a lot more than the Dodgers did. It's just a question of where is he going to play. When you look at Nico's going to be locking down shortstop, Christopher Morel's either going to be in center field or second base, Seiya's going to be in right. Depending on what happens with Ian Happ in the coming days, he's probably going to be in left. So unless you want to move McKinstry to third and stick him at third, that might be where he's going to have to learn to be an everyday player.
See, I view it the same exact way, but I think we have a very different outfield. I truly do. I think Morel is definitely one of those guys we're going to see there. Even though I think when everybody's up and everybody's here, I think Morel stays at second base. I look at the pipeline and I look at everything that's going on. I don't even think it's because he plays the position well. I think it's just because of what's coming through this outfield pipeline. I think you're looking at, P. Crow Armstrong, obviously Brennan Davis coming as soon as possible. And then obviously Seiya is one of those guys that, you just have to put him in the lineup because, and not to say that he's not good, but it's, you just paid this man to be here for the next 5 years, $85 million. He's playing. And that's really how I'm viewing that right now. I think that's a solid outfield. I think obviously James is going to be at third in the hot corner. And I think he's going to be, obviously, me and you spoke about it, one of the fan favorites of this team very soon, very quickly. But
I think the biggest question mark is Christian Hernandez, though, because when Christian Hernandez comes up, he's going to short. Right. And he's going to bump Nico from short to second. So then if that's the case, where does Morel go?
See, that was my biggest thing with what you were saying is I don't think a lock is Nico right now. I think you have this position right now because of the situation that we're in. But at the end of the day, there's a bunch of guys, whether it's, Perlanta or Ed Howard, and you look at all these other guys, and Christian Hernandez is kind of that odd man out as of right now just because of age. Mm-hmm. But the second this kid turns the age 20 to 21, the time starts clicking. You look at what's happening with Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis Jr., and a bunch of other young guys. We're not sitting these guys that long anymore. Like, guys are flying through this pipeline. So right now for you, my big thing is Willie. I think Willie and Ian are the biggest question marks right now. When you're looking at the next, let's say, I'm not going to say 48 hours because it's about, 2:30, 3 p.m.
Yeah, you're looking at 24 hours from now.
Yeah, I'd say about 24 hours from now. What are you really looking to get from – let's start with Ian before we get into Wilson, because Wilson's going to be a longer conversation. For Ian Happ right now, the market – from your perspective, what do you think that is? Especially, we can get into it a little bit later, but what Josh Hader was just able to get having a shitty month of July. When you're looking at that right now and you're looking at how well Ian's played, still kind of being 27, 28 years old, do you have that conversation that you think you can get a top 10 prospect for Ian Happ right now?
I thought Tampa Bay would make a run at Ian Happ until they went and got Peralta from Arizona, so I kind of think that takes Ian Happ out of the Tampa Bay equation. But I think Atlanta's a wild card to get Ian Happ at this point, just because they went and got Rosario and Jock Peterson last year for the outfield. They still need some outfield help because if you're the Braves, you could easily give the Cubs Vaughn Grissom, Jared Schuster, and Tucker Davidson in terms of prospects. And the Cubs have tried to get Austin Riley for a couple of years. Throw Austin Riley in that deal because Ian Happ is pretty much the same type of player as Austin Riley except a switch hitter.
Right.
And that helps the Cubs because they can put Austin Riley at third because I'm getting sick and tired of the Patrick Wisdom experiment at this point. So they can stick Austin Riley at third or in left because he's played left. Same with Patrick Wisdom. He's got starts in left. And then you have the prospects Vaughn Grissom, Jared Schuster, and Tucker Davidson that you can plug in your system where two of them are going to probably sit in that 13 to 15 range, and then Vaughn Grissom's going to be top 10.
Now, I know my in off the bench guys would hate to hear that because they got mad love for Austin and they want to see him. But watching this kid grow in Tennessee and really what he's done on a championship team, Austin's one of those guys where Dustin, I love what I'm hearing right now. But my big thing is James. I think Triantos is so huge right now and so hugely undervalued. I feel like by the fan base, I feel like the front office highly values him. And I think it would be putting him in a weird situation because Austin's 25. I think, like you said, you're tired of the Patrick Wisdom experiment because of the age and because of you just not really being that guy ever. And I've had him on my show. He's an amazing individual. He does amazing things. And, he'll always have that rookie home run record until someone breaks it. So that's great. But longevity wise, it's definitely a conversation to being like, you're not that guy. And
that's where the DH comes in handy though, because you could move Riley to the DH and still put Triantos at third.
Right, 100%. But that's my thing is where it'll change everything from a market standpoint of what guys are worth. And it's like, does Austin want to play third base? That's a whole conversation. But for you right now, Ian Happ for Austin Riley, Austin's been very consistent. He's been very consistent. And Ian, for you, if you can kind of just go into what you've seen from him for people who may not follow the Cubs since 2017. For me personally, just to get it out of the way, I always felt like Ian was rushed. I felt like Ian came up way too soon. And the only reason because of that was because Dexter Fowler departed from the Chicago Cubs. Jorge Soler departed. Max Scherzer departed. A lot of guys, I think I said Matt, not Max, but a lot of guys departed throughout that outfield. And that's a huge problem. And you had to bring up Ian to be able to get to the NLCS the way they did. But I felt like he was just living in the shadow for way too long. And let's give him his flowers because his first full season without Rizzo Bryant Baez, I mean, he's an all-star and he does his thing. But for you right now, if you're a GM, are you truly willing to give all that up knowing that from 2017 to now, there really hasn't been much production from Ian at a consistent basis? This is his first real good season. Are you willing to give up a cornerstone piece like Austin Riley if you're Atlanta?
I am, because typically when you get to age 27 is when you start entering your prime as a player, like that age 27 to age 32 season. And if you look at Ian Happ and his struggles in the past, he had a great rookie season. He had 26 or 27 home runs his rookie season, despite his average only being like 256. But the next 3 years after that, the reason for his struggles was because he was not an everyday player. Joe Madden kept flip-flopping him and Albert Almora in center field, and they kept flip-flopping Happ and moving him around to the point where he never had like that regular everyday role where he could get his at-bats. And then you saw last year, he finally got the opportunity to be a regular player, whether it was in center field or then left field once Jock Peterson got traded. And come July of last year, he started to put it together, and he's carried that over now into this year. And I think a lot of GMs are going to look at that now that he has that everyday role, the everyday comfort of knowing he's going to be in left field every single day and hitting third through fifth in that lineup. This is the type of Ian Happ that you're going to get. Granted, the power numbers are a little bit down this year because he's not hitting close to 20 home runs, but the average is around the 280, which is better than I think a lot of people expected him to get to.
Right. And I think that's one of the problems with me with Ian right now from a GM standpoint. It is kind of like, can I trust you to, like you said, kind of continue entering your prime? Or is this where it's going to plateau? Like, is this the kind of guy you're always going to be, or could you be that potential top 15 MVP candidate? Not top 15 player, but just a candidate in a season. And I think that's what Ian's ceiling always was, is being that guy. Maybe he's not a consistent everyday top 10, top 20 player, but he's going to be able to give that production, that 4 or 5 guy on a roster on a championship team that can really be what you want him to be. And I think Atlanta needs that, especially with Ronald and his injury history, because I'm going to be honest. I really did think, it's just an ACL tear. It is what it is. But Ronald has not been able to stay healthy consistently and is kind of wiry in that sense of like he's just going rogue, doing his own thing. Him and his manager have issues, and I feel like Ian would bring more of a security to that. And okay, I could trust if anything happens to Ronald, Ian Happ's coming in, and that's a perfect conversation. But to segue that, having this conversation right now and understanding this is what we got for Scott, this is what we got for Martin, and this is what we could get for Ian. Wilson Contreras right now from the Mets building, as far as everybody's saying,
God.
is having this conversation of we're not going to give you a top prospect for a rental or even anything close to a top prospect for a rental. And my thing is if you want to get something, you have
got
to
to give something.
Right. And you could see that with anything. You look at the Josh Hader trade with the Padres, who just gave up a top prospect and some pretty solid role players and a great closer in Taylor Rogers. So you look at that. You look at other things. Let's break it down to 2016. You give up Gleyber Torres for Aroldis Chapman. That you have to do what you have to do in order to do that. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to have Gleyber at second base this entire time, or even have him at short and Javi at second. I think that would have been amazing. But at the end of the day, it's not going to help you win a World Series. If the Mets want to compete right now, Dustin, I know it's very unfair to sit here and demand Francisco Alvarez because he's their number one prospect. And obviously
I wouldn't even ask for Alvarez.
Right. But that's my thing. It's like, it's that conversation of we're not asking you for a top 3 player in your farm. We're not asking you for a top 5 player in your farm. We're asking you for maybe 1 or 2 top 10 guys and a couple of decent pieces in your top 20. Right now, they're not even willing to budge on that from what everybody's saying in the conversations that are going on currently right now. It's August 1st. What do you think the real market is for Wilson Contreras? And do we just keep him if we don't get what we want back?
I don't think the Cubs can afford to keep him just because I don't think as much as he says he wants to be around, which I do believe he wants to be around because you can see how emotional he is when he's talking about leaving and things like that. I don't trust the front office as far as I can throw them that they're even going to make him an offer next year if he does stay around the end of this year. So instead of risking to lose him for absolutely nothing, they do need to figure out a way to potentially get something for that. I know the Mets don't want to make the same mistakes with Pete Crow Armstrong and basically give up a guy like that again in the Wilson Contreras deal, which I understand. But you have that one infielder that they keep linking the Cubs to in the Mets system. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's like, I think, 12 or 13 in the Mets system. And I know if the Cubs get rid of Wilson Contreras, they're going to want that number 3 prospect, which is the Mets catcher, which the Mets don't want to budge on him. But I'm like, well, if you're going to get Contreras, why not just give us your catcher and then you can re-sign Contreras anyways?
Right.
But why not give the Cubs Dominic Smith? Dominic Smith is blocked by Pete Alonso at first base. He's not going to see consistent time at first base. The Cubs don't have a first baseman right now because Alfonso Rivas hasn't hit at all this year, and he just got optioned back to Iowa. Frank Schwindel hasn't doing anything that he remotely did last year. Right. Send Dominic Smith to the Cubs and give him a shot at first base to finish out the year. Give us 1 or 2 prospects. Give us like that one infielder that's like 11th in your system. And then give us maybe either 2 guys in your top 20 or just give us the number 11, the number 3 prospect, and Dominic Smith, and we'll give you Robertson and Contreras.
Right. And I think it's also a conversation. Matt Mervis is one for me. I'm sure you followed him a little bit.
Matty.
Matty's that guy. So I think, we also have very quickly figured out our first baseman woes at this very moment. But also with Matty, I don't know what the future holds for him either. This is his first really great season. And me and you broke it down earlier at the beginning of the season. Matt Mervis wasn't really a conversation. It was Bryce Ball and Frank Schwindel. And that's not saying much. So for Matt to kind of emerge the way he has, that's great. But like you said, if we can get a guy who is an actual top prospect, who is actually a consistent first baseman, and his numbers can replicate that as well, he's just behind Pete Alonso, which is the same conversation about Ian Happ, who you were behind. You know what I mean? Like, you're behind Dexter Fowler, you're behind all these other guys in the outfield, and you're not going to get that consistent playing time. For me right now, though, I'm still on the whole train of Harry Ford. I'm still on the train of Harry Ford and a couple other guys out of Seattle. I think Seattle would be able to budge in that kind of conversation. What bothers me the most, and it's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is, I understand Wilson would be a rental, but he's only a rental if you allow him to be one. I think if you want him and you want him the way you say you want him, then pay him.
Mm-hmm.
Pay him. There's no problem. Wilson will stay. New York will love Wilson Contreras,
Yeah, they will.
especially the Mets. It's that conversation of just understanding it's not a rental if you keep him. And that's the biggest thing. And if Wilson Contreras decides at the end of the season, I want to remain a Chicago Cub and I'm coming back home, by all means, I'll take him. But it really comes down to it at the end of the day to me with the Miguel Amaya situation and Wilson Contreras' situation right now. I don't want to sit here and give up Wilson Contreras without potentially getting a replacement for him. And I look at Harry Ford, I look at Francisco Alvarez, I look at other catchers in the Mets system, and I'm like, if you want an all-star catcher, you have to give us your prospects.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, because you're not getting, it's not a prospect for a prospect trade. This is not a maybe for a maybe. This is a certain thing for a maybe.
Yep.
And that's what they really need to look at it right now. And I understand it from both sides. But if I'm the Mets and I look at what the Yankees are doing and I look at what the Dodgers are doing, and let's be real, what the Padres are probably about to do within the next 24 hours, and even the St. Louis Cardinals, whichever one of them ends up with Juan Soto, and we can even throw the Dodgers in that conversation. Those seem to be the three teams that are really in here. I think Seattle is still a team that is that conversation where we can sit here and say they might make a couple moves. Probably not Juan, but they'll make a couple moves. I think right now you really look at it and you say, we are going to drain you for every single thing we can get for Wilson Contreras. And this is not we don't, for a lack of a better word, Dustin, me and you talk about it all the time. We could give a fuck.
Yep.
I don't care how I finish this season. If Wilson Contreras is here or not, mad love for him, but it's not going to change the results. He's here now and we're losing now. Yep. So with him here or not, we're going to take what we can from you. Now, the question is, can the New York Mets win the World Series with this roster as it's currently constructed? I don't think so.
I do, because they're about to get the biggest trade piece at the deadline without making a trade.
I don't know. I think
Jacob deGrom comes back tomorrow.
100%. And I think that's understandable. But I think one of the biggest things right now is you're looking at the other moves. Frankie Montas is about to end up somewhere. And I think that's one of the most curious.
I think he's going to end up in Toronto is where I think he's going to end up.
I hope he ends up in Toronto, because Toronto has, I told you from the beginning of the year, they're my World Series.
They were my pick too, and now they're finally starting to play like it, and all they're missing is kind of that one rotation piece where you can go Manoah, Barrios, Montas, and Gausman as your four for the playoffs.
100%. And I think once that team finally starts to click, they're going to be in a whole different atmosphere. But with that being said, you look at the Mets right now, even with DeGrom, and I always say it like this: DeGrom has injury issues, Scherzer has injury issues. So you need that insurance. You need that insurance of, I need a bat, I need somebody I know I can count on, a Wilson Contreras who is actually going to understand the game and be able to work with these two. I mean, somebody who's worked with Cy Young candidates like John Lester, Jake Arrieta, Yu Darvish. You're talking about it. And Dustin, me and you have spoken about it. I don't know how. If you can catch for Yu Darvish, you can do just about anything, because this kid's thrown over 11 pitches during spring training, and that's really what it comes down to. So, and even Kyle Hendricks, you're having that conversation of Wilson can adjust to just about anybody, and he is a top defensive catcher. You look at Pete Alonso, who at times I kind of question him defensively. Other times he looks great. I think you look at Francisco Lindor, Wilson Contreras and Francisco Lindor are going to be 10 times better than Javier Baez and Wilson Contreras. And that's just my personal opinion. From a defensive standpoint, those two are going to dominate. And I think that's what the Mets see, but they're trying to play it off like it's not. We'll do you a favor and we'll give you a couple prospects. That's where I have a problem with this. So to recap it all, Dustin, so far, is this the way you expected it to go for the Cubs? I think it makes perfect sense. You look at last year, it was Chafin and all the relievers that kind of went first, Tepera, Kimbrel, and then you started to see Rizzo, Baez, Bryant. Right now, biggest pieces, do you see Wilson going first or do you see Ian going first?
The sad part is I don't know if any of them are going to go, and I'm not going to, because I think the Cubs have what they want to get for these people. And the reputation that Jed Hoyer has at this point is he's going to cave right before the deadline is over and basically take what he can get. Right. And I don't think Hoyer's going to cave this year. I think Hoyer's going to keep what he wants to get in return for these guys. And if he doesn't get the package he wants, he's just going to hold on to him and take his chances in free agency. The big thing right now is you look at that Luis Castillo deal with the Mariners yesterday, or Saturday, whatever day that was, and you look at the return that Cincinnati got for Luis Castillo. That's going to be the return that the Cubs are going to try to get for Wilson Contreras.
Right.
Somewhere along that lines. And if they don't get it, they're going to kind of be in the position to be like, why make this move if we can't get that return? But you also have to look at the Juan Soto situation right now. He is exactly why the market is as slow as it is right now, because they are waiting to see where he goes and if he goes anywhere, because once that domino falls, then everything's going to go after it, because
Right.
they're going to know that, well, the Padres just got Soto. They're off the market for everybody else. Let's feed her this way. Or Soto just went to the Cardinals. They're off the market. Now we can figure out where everybody else is going to go. And I think until Soto goes, you're going to have a very, very slow trade deadline up until maybe an hour before the deadline passes. I think the first piece to come off the Cubs table outside of who we've seen already is going to be David Robertson, which I'm surprised he's still a Cub when you look at the
Right.
Cubs not even using him at all in the Pittsburgh series when he was ready to pitch, and they kind of just sat in the pen knowing that his name was kind of being shuffled with the Mets and with a couple other teams. I think him and Michael Gibbons are going to be the first two that are gone, and then you'll start to see Happ or Contreras, but ultimately I do think Contreras will be gone over Ian Happ, and I think he actually ends up in the Yankees. I don't think he will end up in New York on the Mets side of things. I think the Yankees will come back in and get Contreras, because you've seen the rumors the last couple of offseasons. The Yankees have been trying to get Contreras for years.
Right.
This is the best chance that they have to get him, and the Cubs have done very well in terms of business with the Yankees at the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those conversations, though. As long as I don't end up with Joey Gallo, I'd take whatever I can from the Yankees at this point.
Give
I
us
did
Josh
see
Donaldson back.
bring Jack Josh Donaldson. I think that was something that never even got to happen. I always thought it was going to be super interesting if Josh ended up a Cub. That's why I loved him on Toronto. But in all seriousness, you did say bring somebody back, and I think I
Gleyber.
did see a couple. Gleiber is the conversation I've seen a lot of people talk about. Is give us Gleiber back. Kind of. It's a checkmate for 2016. We got the World Series, and now we're gonna get Gleiber back the same way you got Gleiber and you got Aroldis back, and we're gonna
And
ask
you
for
got
that.
Rizzo last year in place of.
Right. And I think that's a beautiful conversation in itself, because I'm perfectly content with having Gleiber at second base. I think that'll be a beautiful thing. I think Nico would remain at short just because of defensive issues. I think Gleiber, as good as he is, I'd like to see him continue to develop that. But if he can come back to the system that once was, and then you have Morel, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Brennan Davis in the outfield, I mean, that's a beautiful thing with James and company coming soon too. And we could see what happens with our boy Matty. But I think Matty's looking big. Matty's getting a lot bigger, a lot stronger. So I'm really excited to see Mervis and where he continues to add up.
Mervis will be up in September.
Yeah,
If they
100%.
don't get a guy like Dominic Smith at the deadline, it's going to be Mervis's audition in September. They will get him up
100%.
because he's got 87 or 88 RBIs right now, which leads all of minor league baseball. There's only one player that actually has more RBIs than him, and that's Pete Alonso, who's got 94. I think the next one is 87, so Mervis has more than everybody in Major League Baseball right now. He's got 23 home runs. He's hitting .316 between AA and AAA. So, I mean, what else does he have to accomplish this year before he gets a shot? Nothing.
100%.
You give him a shot this year where your team's not going anywhere. You give him 30 games to audition. If he performs well, you give him spring training as his extended audition. If he wins the job out of spring next year, it's his job to roll with.
100%. Dustin, before we get out of here, I know you're a busy man and there isn't much else going on right now. That's usually how the deadline goes. It's all bundled together. Everything will happen and everything will go. Before we get out of here, the Milwaukee Brewers contending or pretending right now with the Josh Hader move?
I think they just made themselves pretenders more than contenders, honestly. I understand the point of it just because Hader's hitting free agency after the 2023 season, but he's still under contract next year. So, yes, he's got a 4.24 ERA, but he had 3 outings where he gave up 16 runs. Take away those 3 outings, he's given up 3 runs all year. So, he's still one of the top 2 or 3 closers in baseball. Trevor Rogers or Taylor, I forget if it's Taylor or Trevor, whatever Rogers I got back. He's got a very similar ERA to Josh Hader. He's a left-hander. He's got the same amount of saves, but he's 5 years older than Josh Hader, and he's put up a 4.35 ERA in a pitcher's ballpark. Not a hitter's ballpark, but a pitcher's ballpark. So now you're going to Miller Park, that's a hitter's ballpark. I don't trust Rogers at Miller Park. I just don't. So unless the Brewers' plan is to use Rogers as a setup man and move Williams to the closer role, which it looks like that is their plan, then maybe that works out. But if I'm the Brewers, I don't make that move this year. I look at it again next year when Hader's under his final year of team control. See if you can get him signed to a long-term extension, and if you can't, then you explore that option. But because he had 1 year left, I think it's a stupid move by the Brewers.
100%. And for me personally, the way I look at it, they did get a good handful back. They got a couple solid prospects that normally you're not going to see throughout the Brewers system. And that's with complete and utter disrespect because they cannot bring in an offensive talent throughout their pipeline in a very long time. And that's been a problem for them consistently. Now, Dustin, this is a question that one of the fans asked, and it's in the comments right now. Did they move him to try to flip as many pieces as they can for Juan Soto? I'm gonna say straight up, no, it's not happening. He's
The
not
only way
going
it
to
works is if
Milwaukee.
Yelich gets flipped.
Yeah, that was my big thing too. Is they're not a big enough market to have both Yelich and Juan Soto on the same contract.
Especially when you have Burns and Woodruff that you're going to have to pay next year and then in 2024. That's the only way that would work is if you flip Yelich.
Now, right now, though, you look at the Josh Hader stuff. Let's say somehow, some way, in off the bench becomes the biggest, exciting podcast to ever happen this Wednesday because Juan Soto ends up in a St. Louis Cardinals jersey and Randy, DB, and Jim are doing backflips. How easy are the Cardinals going to walk away with the division with Josh Hader gone, Wilson Contreras gone? You look at Castillo's gone, didn't really matter anyways, and the Pirates still being the Pirates. Them adding Juan Soto with Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, and honestly a great rotation when healthy. How serious do you think they should take the St. Louis Cardinals if Juan Soto ends up in the NL Central?
I said it earlier today. I think the Brewers may have handed the Cardinals the division by getting rid of Hader, especially if they get Soto. I mean, the Brewers have better starting pitching at the top of the rotation, but I think the Cardinals still have more pitching depth, like 1 through 5. And then you look at the offense. The Cardinals have a better offense. They're not a home run or bust type of team. They do a lot more offensively than what the Brewers can do. You add Juan Soto into that mix and put him with Goldschmidt and Arenado in the middle of that lineup. You better hope to God that Taylor Rogers pans out because and I'm not going to say he's going to come into Milwaukee and like make every single inning immaculate. I'm not going to say he's going to come in and be perfect because Hader wasn't perfect. But if Rogers comes in and struggles for like 3 of maybe his first 5 outings, that trade's going to blow up in their GM's face. Because you can't be getting rid of a guy like Hader who, yes, he's having a down year this year, but you still know what you have out of Hader and you know what you can get out of Hader when he's on to bring in a guy who might be struggling. That's for a first-place club, you can't do that. 100%. So he better hope to God that this move pans out. Otherwise, it's going to be the first time that the Brewers GM has questioned since he's taken that position.
100%. Dustin, we appreciate you for coming on, my brother. I know you got to go pick up your kids. We will be back within the next 24 hours, most likely talking about either one of the most
confusing. We can hop back on at 5:30 because I guarantee stuff will be done before then.
Oh, man, I hope so. I'm really not trying to wait until like a Chris Bryant situation last year where it's literally 5 seconds before the deadline's over. And Chris gets flipped for, I love the prospects we got for Chris, but it was just so frustrating and I just wanted it done. But Dustin, I appreciate you, brother. We'll talk to you soon. If you can't already, please let everybody know where they can find you and where all of your podcasts are.
Chicago Sports HQ is where you can find most of my stuff, primarily Cubs HQ, Bears HQ, and Bulls HQ. I don't have as many podcasts on there right now just because with the minor leagues going through the constant shuffling of promotions and things like that, I'm waiting until after the trade deadline before I start reaching out to some of those guys because then we'll kind of know who's moving, who's not moving, and like where they go. But we will have more podcasts on there this come September, October. But yeah, pretty much all my stuff is on there. And then as well as the ASAP network with Mike whenever he gets his pretty little face on there.
I'll think about it. But Dustin, we appreciate you for coming here, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you, bro.
Take care.
With that being said, I know we're talking about Cubs, but there's also some news right now going around that Shohei Ohtani, who was originally supposed to be on the trade block, but not on the trade block. They're willing to listen. The Los Angeles Angels are willing to listen to any offer right now for Shohei Ohtani, which is understandable. I think you look at it and you look at this team right now, one of the best athletes to ever walk on a baseball field, not named Bo Jackson, is definitely there. And I think that's a conversation. Or Deion Sanders. I ain't gonna forget Deion. Primetime did his thing. But with that being said, in all seriousness, you look at Shohei as one of the greatest talents right now. And the rumor was that the White Sox and the Padres were in heavily for getting Shohei Ohtani. And I pray to God that he ends up on the South Side. But as of right now, the consensus is that Shohei Ohtani is going to stay in Los Angeles. And the biggest problem for me, him remaining in Anaheim, is you're just wasting your time. You're wasting your potential. You're wasting everything else. And that's not his fault. But the big thing is hearing the White Sox name involved in that. it makes me so frustrated. I think right now, before we get out of here, I expect the White Sox to make a couple moves. And we've talked about it time and time again. You have guys like Max Scherzer, you have guys like Carlos Rodon that you could have brought back, Kevin Gossman, and the list goes on, Barrios. We can do this all day. And then that's just from a pitching perspective. You look at from an offensive perspective, you look at Nick Castellanos, Trevor Story, Rizzo, Bryant, Baez. The list goes on of amazing talents that were throughout this free agency class. And the Chicago White Sox didn't hit on any of it. They flipped Craig Kimbrell for AJ Pollock and hoped it worked. It didn't. They hoped Lucas Giolito would emerge back to that 2019 form that he had, and he didn't. So it's definitely a situation right now where I'm looking at the Chicago White Sox. If they want to make up for not doing anything during free agency, they're definitely going to need to do something at this trade deadline, whether that be Shohei Ohtani, whether that be Juan Soto, whether that be bringing back Frankie Montas from the Oakland Athletics, who they originally traded him there. It's definitely a frustrating situation for me when I look at the Chicago White Sox and what they're trying to do. I'm a Cubs fan at heart, so I could truly care less what they do. But from a fan perspective and just a baseball perspective, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting situation. And Dustin always working, always doing his thing. They're looking at Andrew Chafin, and why not? We just take the entire 2020 Chicago Cubs bullpen. You already had Craig Kimbrell, you already had Ryan Tepera. Now you're going to bring in this kid, and you already had Dylan Cease. And it's definitely a situation right now where they're taking our sloppy seconds all day. I'm fine with that. I truly don't care. But with that being said, I think the White Sox in this position right now, they need to be in on Juan Soto. And I know Jerry Reinsdorf isn't going to pay him. I understand that, but you're still going to have him for 2.5 years almost with that club option, having him for the next 2 years before he really hits the free agent market. I think it's even worth it. I think it's worth it. Even if you have to give up Eloy, I think I'd give up Gavin Sheets, Eloy Jimenez, and a couple top prospects, a few top prospects for this kid. I think it's going to be super exciting. I just can't wait to see it all pan out. But if they don't do anything, it's going to be a very, very quiet room on the south side. But with that being said, I just want to say thank you guys for listening. You can find me on all social media platforms right under here. You can find me on Mike on the Mike podcast or the All Sports All Plays Network. If you haven't already, please check out Skytown. We have Skytown here for you right here, hosted by me, brought to you by the WNBA and the Chicago Sky. We do amazing work. We just interviewed Coach James Wade and Courtney Vandersloot the other night. And Candace Parker and many other individuals are always on our show coming on, giving us their time. And we always appreciate that over here. We cover every single game. We are coming into the home stretch, 6 games left until the WNBA playoffs. Time to go back to back. I'm super excited about it. But with that being said, I'm super excited for the next 24 hours. This is my favorite time of the year is the trade deadline because I just love the minors and prospects. It's a great time to be alive, like Pride always says. So with that being said, definitely give the All Sports All Plays Network some love. Thank you guys for listening. This is Mike Hughes.